Okay, so before we jump into today's video, like promised, I picked a comment off the channel and I will answer that. So KB Diesel Shop said, talk about shift points and boost launch. It's a pretty generic question, so I'll just give you what we leave the line at in my truck and JP's and what we shoot the shift for. On my truck, I'm leaving the line currently at about 3,200 to 3,300 RPM and 22 to 23 and a half pounds of boost, depending on the track surface and stuff like that. And I'm still relatively new to the truck, so we're still learning what shift points it likes and whatnot. But right now I'm shifting about 5,000, 5,100. That's probably about where I think I'm going to stay with it, but so far that's where we're shifting at. On JP's truck, on the 497 pass and the 50, tons of 50 passes that we've ran with it, we have tried launching anywhere from 3,500 RPM with the dump on and 22 pounds of boost to 3,100 RPM and 24 and a half pounds of boost. We like to shift that thing right about the same area, about 51, 5,200, so that way it doesn't get drugged down too low. And that seems to be what was working best for us on his truck and being the most reliable. As far as shift points on your guys' truck, that's something that you're just going to have to play with. Totally depends on the way that your truck makes power, how heavy your truck is, the cam profile. There's a lot of factors that go into that. If you're running a big single, I would say, something that it's going to be really easy to fall under the turbo with. You don't want to leave the line with less than 20 pounds of boost. And generally all diesel engines don't want to crank over 5,500. So I would shift, somewhere between 4,500 and 5,200, depending on how serious your combo is. What's up, guys? Logan here with Logan Built, back here in the build room tonight. So if any of you guys follow me on social media, you've seen my post about switching to a Turbo 400 in my race truck. And I think for the most part, everybody knew that was an April Fool's joke, but there was definitely a couple people that thought I was serious about that. I will never not run a 48RE in my race truck. I will never not run a transmission that I built. I will quit racing before I have to do that, or I will find a way to better engineer the 48RE platform. We are constantly working on coming up with new and better innovative stuff for the 48 platform. Gearin and I have a lot of cool stuff in the works for that platform, so we definitely are not giving up on it. It's just a joke, but it gives us a great opportunity to discuss the differences between a Turbo 400 and a 48RE. Turbo 400 is probably the most popular drag racing transmission that has ever existed, and 48RE is arguably the most popular diesel drag racing transmission. So I think we should spend a little bit of time comparing and contrasting the two, so that way you guys kind of know which direction you want to go for your build, and we'll give some of my opinion on it there in the meantime. So we'll start with the Turbo 400. Turbo 400 has been around for years and years and years. It's got 40, 50 years of R&D put into that thing. Therefore, there's a lot of really nice high-end stuff for a Turbo 400. You can spend a lot of money on one, but you can also make one that seems to be pretty dang strong and has all of the bells and whistles. When we're talking about a lockup Turbo 400, the captured clutch converter allows you to run a dump valve and still utilize lockup. The way that the circuitry is in those, you can pulse width the lockup in. There's a lot of trick things you can do with the lockup on those. Some guys are even hitting them with air pressure to lock it up faster. There's just a lot of things that the lockup converters and those allow you to do with a Turbo 400. Because they're so popular and there's so much R&D behind them, there's a million different stator options for those things. There's several different manufacturers that make some really nice stuff for the Turbo 400 as far as the converter goes. So you really have just a huge swath of parts options for those. The other really nice thing about a Turbo 400 is there's tons of custom gear sets for them. You can pretty much pick dang near every 1-2 ratio you want for those things. They're relatively small. They're not physically that much bigger than a 48 if you took the overdrive away from the 48, but because they're relatively small, you can package them in just about anything. They're definitely a really good transmission, and they absolutely have their place. The drawback of a all-out lock-up Turbo 400 is the price and what you have to change in the truck to make it work. You can't just go and get $4,000 or $5,000 Turbo 400 and put it in your diesel truck. It's not going to live. Those things are small. The shafts are small. The hard parts are small in them. So to get them to hold up to the power, the torque, and the weight of a diesel, you've got to replace everything. Those things have to be basically completely custom front to back. And what you end up doing there is you spend 11, 12, 13, 15, as much as $17,000 on just the transmission. No bell housing, no converter, no engine adapter plate, no shifter. It's a lot of investment. A torque converter, you can get them as cheap as $2 or $3 grand, but you can spend as much as $8 or $10 grand on a billet lock-up torque converter for one of those things. By the time you figure in the custom engine adapter plate, the flex plate, the shifter, and changing your drive shafts if it's a four-wheel drive truck, running an SCS transfer case, there's a lot that you got to change to run a Turbo 400. It's going to cost you about $30,000 to do it right. That is a huge investment. If you're watching my channel, you're probably not that guy. I know I'm not that guy. But if you do have the budget to run something like that, I can understand why you would want to go to Turbo 400 because of all those reasons. The one thing you also have to keep in mind with a Turbo 400 is you do not have overdrive. And because you don't have overdrive, if you're a four-wheel drive truck, let's say, you're pretty much going to have to run custom 9-inch axles front and rear to get a gear ratio that's going to work with just 1-to-1. So the way that we run our trucks now, if you have a stock, say, second gen or a third gen, you've either got a 354, a 342, or a 373 gear is what the rear gear and front gear is in your truck. Well, when you only have 1-to-1 and you don't have overdrive, you're not able to RPM through the traps where you need to be at. You're going to be way too high on RPM before you make it to the traps. You're going to be out of power. So you either need an overdrive or you need to re-gear the truck. So you need to drop down to a 320 gear, 305, something in the low threes to be able to run a 1-to-1 ratio and still not go through the traps at 5,500 RPM where they're not making any horsepower. So there's really more to the Turbo 400 deal beyond even the cost of the Turbo 400, the cost of changing the drive shafts, the cost of changing the cross member. Now you got to factor in third members into this thing, and for a Dana 60, Dana 70, Dana 80 AAM, you don't have many options. There's no 325 gear option for that. So that's why you're forced to, hey, if it needs to be any higher gear than a 354, you're going to have to go to a custom 9-inch axle. Now, the 48RE. 48RE is what came in most of these race trucks from the factory. Most race trucks are Dodge trucks nowadays, it seems, and if they're not Dodge trucks, they're usually Cummins powered. So you just use factory parts, factory engine adapter plate, plentiful flex plates. There's really no custom stuff involved nowadays in putting a Cummins in just about anything. And so, especially if it's a second or third gen truck or fourth gen truck that came with the Cummins from the factory, you don't have to change anything. Cross members stay the same, your drive shaft stay the same, your transfer case stays the same, you can run all that stuff. So there's a big money savings just by sticking with the 48 because that's what already came in your truck from the factory. Now, the 48 is limited in the fact that we do not yet have custom gear sets readily available. We're working on it. It's coming. We've been testing some with really good results. But that is not currently an option. So you're stuck with the 245, 145 gear set that's in those things. But you get the overdrive. And with the overdrive, that allows you to keep your stock axles, your stock gear sets, all that. That's a huge savings in itself. I mean, you could spend $10,000-$20,000 on a set of, front and rear 9 inches. It's a very expensive endeavor. The benefit of the 48 as well is everything was built from the factory in mind that, hey, this is going behind a diesel. So everything in it is built very stout. The 48 can get a bad rep because they weren't the greatest transmissions in stock form, but the platform itself, if you go through and you fix all of the problems with it, it is an amazing transmission. It is very stout. They have come a long way over the last 5 years. With the current technology, we're able to run a trans brake. We're able to either have a lockup converter or a non-lockup converter that is still very efficient. We now are running billet aluminum drums. We're doing lightweight sun shells. We're doing things to save weight. We're doing very much racing-minded stuff in these 47, 48s now, with the added peace of mind and benefit that the shafts and hard parts in these things were designed to basically do what we do with them. Currently, you can spend about $10,000 to $12,000, maybe a little bit more depending on some bolt together converter stuff on the 47, 48, which is a lot of money, but you're still half the price of the Turbo 400. The Turbo 400 doesn't overdrive, so if you're four-wheel drive, you have to keep that in mind with your axle selection. So in my opinion, if you're drag racing a full-size four-wheel drive diesel truck, with the exception of some teams that have the budget for it, that are trying to run at the absolute elite top of the motorsports, diesel motorsports, you do not need a Turbo 400 for your truck. In fact, I would suggest not running a Turbo 400 in your truck. I do not see the benefit in the added expense for what you get in return. The other thing that a lot of people don't talk about with the Turbo 400 is it is not a set it and forget it. It's not a one-time cost. Look, if you spent 30 grand on it and you could run it for 10 years and it never broke, might have a little bit of an argument there. But you can still break them. They're very sensitive to weight. They do not like 5,000-pound trucks. They don't like burnouts, especially if you're doing burnouts in a heavy truck. They can still break. There's parts that still can fail in them because they were never designed to be behind a 2,000 horsepower diesel that makes 2,500 foot-pounds of torque and a 5,000-pound truck trying to do a four-wheel drive burnout. That's just not the environment that all of those parts were designed to live in. So if you have a Turbo 400 in your truck, this is not a dig at Turbo 400s by any stretch of the imagination. This is just me explaining this because I see it a lot out on the internet. I see the Turbo 400 thing just thrown around so easily because it is a really good transmission, but it is no joke. Turbo 400 takes a very big budget, takes a very serious endeavor. So if you're racing your Cummins full-size four-wheel drive truck, in my opinion, where we're at with the 48 RE, it's the best bang for your buck and then some, and it's only going to get better from here. So hope this helps clarify things a little bit better between those two transmissions. And I appreciate you guys watching as always, and stay tuned. We will catch you on the next one.